So let me also welcome the board members from Huntington, South Australia and the Northern Territory. It's wonderful that you've joined us. If there's anyone else who'd like to be personally welcomed, just chat, put yourself in chat, and I'd love to do it, because even though we can't see you all, this is very much part of national community building. So let's go to our second speaker. Later on, we're going to go right up to the top of the world, to the Netherlands. Right now, we're going down to the bottom of the world, to Tasmania. And it's my pleasure to welcome Julie Burgess, who's a carer from Tasmania and a very committed advocate for a member of her family. So welcome to you, Julie, and take it away. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to speak. And I do think of Huntington's families in particular as I do. At 27, my daughter, with immense dignity and courage, tested positive to Huntington's disease, but at that time she also put in place documentation to enable me to speak on her behalf at a later time. Sadly, when she was 30, circumstances led to her needing to be in hospitalisation, and then the guardianship, enduring guardianship, was enacted. So thus began the journey of me speaking in her behalf. So how does a person who's shy advocate for somebody, take on this huge responsibility? What can you advocate for? How do you go about it? So, and also, what is the key to making it work? Thankfully, the key to advocating, it doesn't cost a cent. And I do say thankfully, and this will give you a little bit of an insight into my daughter. Has a great ability to online shop, dresses, amazingly, and very flamboyant, has quite a flair. So when she, at 27, went for her Huntington's assessment, she dressed with this fox fur stole just draped across the shoulders, complete with the little dangly paws of the fox, and she was in full vintage attire. The hairstyle was just wow. Handbag, shoes, dress. She was absolutely class. I was just a poor relation. I just came in ordinary clothes. But I do now know that as an advocate, it's like we do need that special cape dressed, draped across our shoulders, because we need this invisible cape. It's required when we have to speak up for a family member. And that cape is the key to effective advocacy, because it's woven with love. And how do I know that that cape's effective? Because Christy constantly, unconditionally says, "I love you, Mum." She really appreciates the fact that I can speak up on her behalf. So my presentation is actually going to define these different aspects of love, or AKA our advocacy cape. It's going to be in various settings, hospitalisation, dealing within community care, allied health professionals, and even GPs. So all the experiences that are shared are deeply personal. It's solely for the purpose of just opening up what it's like for a family member to advocate for someone who has Huntington's disease. And at this point, I really would love to acknowledge all the dedicated professionals and support workers, staff who've just helped us along in this journey so far. And sincere thank you. Just head to that first slide. Sorry, that not used to. Here we are. Love is patient and kind. So beginning this independent living journey, Christy needed to transition from home into a psychiatric hospital setting.
Excuse me, Julie, sorry to interrupt, but do you wish to share your
I beg your pardon. Yes.
No hurry at all. You take your time.
Don't worry, this won't be hurried. I'm not real good at this. Okay. Could you please just let me know when that's
I'll let you know
on?
when we see it. Yes, it's there now. Thank you.
All right. So that's all good? Beautiful. Thank
All
you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so love is patient and kind. And starting on this independent living journey for Christy, she needed to transition from home into a psychiatric hospital setting. And it's a really confronting environment. Staff are used to dealing with older persons with dementia. So how does a 30-year-old with no wrinkles fit into this setting? And she was there for quite a while. So an example, how I'd really like to present it in this initial case is just, imagine that you yourself have been within a safe, I can't remember the word they use. Anyway, the doors are closed. You don't have access to go out. It's a safe facility. And basically, you're confronted with basically you're in your own room because the noise of that community living section is just so hard on your fragile brain that you're choosing to stay within that room. Now, also imagine that you have an intense needle phobia. Since you were 4, it's deeply ingrained. In comes the nurse, unannounced. She's ready to draw blood. She's fairly quick by the footsteps, but red light. I could see the confused look on my daughter's face. She was physically retreating. The voice was escalating. And now she could present as a patient who is going to be uncooperative. So that cape gets thrown around the shoulders respectfully to just intercede for a person with Huntington's disease. She's barely awake, fearful, confused. Love is patient and kind. Do I have issues with needles? No, I don't. But this isn't about me. My daughter has the needle phobia. She has Huntington's disease. Let's just slow things down a bit. So briefly, I was able to explain about the needle sensitivity and, more importantly, to prepare Christy, time for some numbing cream, applied beforehand, maybe noted as well that she does have an intense needle phobia. And the current situation is, in her own unit, she has had quite a number of blood tests without any issues at all. It's always on a Monday. That's when the nurse comes into the home, always with the same competent support worker. Yes, it can be handled quite effectively. Sorry, second slide, and I hope I don't lose you again. Is this okay?
Yes, all good.
Beautiful, thank you. Love does not look for its own interests. So another time within the hospital environment, another situation occurred. I walked into my daughter's room. She was clearly upset, telling me through tears she felt frightened and exposed. And it appears that at medication time, quite a tall gentleman, but a man, a staff member, unfamiliar to Christy, had, I think he'd gone in, yes, to take medication. He'd stood over her bed and said, "You should cover yourself up next time." Now, clearly, we do know that with Huntington's, that can be a difficult thing to achieve when you just move around in the bed so often. And in fact, it's a bonus to be in the bed rather than on the floor, which has occurred numerous times. You move around so much. So here's a situation with a young woman who chose earlier on not to form any relationships because she chose to be on her own as a single young woman in case she proved to be Huntington's positive later on. That was her personal choice. Now, as a family member, you're aware of that. You're aware that of the innocence of a person. You know other life's experiences that may trigger vulnerability. So I did choose to approach the two gentlemen on her behalf, and no, I wasn't eager to have this conversation. But my role was advocating for a very vulnerable person to feel safe. Love does not look for its own interests. So yes, the RN did confirm that this, this account did happen, as Christy mentioned. What I thought was really interesting was his response. Oh, she's all right. Wouldn't that be lovely if Huntington's disease was so simple? So going back into Christy's room, I want to say, yes, I have spoken, to the gentleman, but she really was quite fearful. In fact, she was overwhelmed, and she I can't even think of the exact word she used, sorry. It wasn't quite, I feel freaked out, but I feel weirded out. Like, she really was quite affected. So the second conversation with the gentleman began something like this. No, sorry, she's really not okay. But the result of speaking up respectfully, it was so beautiful. The hospital then was able to implement a couple of strategies. And first of all, they said, well, no male staff member is really, they need to go in with another staff member as well, please. The second thing was all staff members were to just courteously knock on the door before entering. And the bonus was here, Christy didn't have that fright of someone just coming into the room unannounced. It started to alleviate that situation as well. So the staff were absolutely wonderful. They cared for Christy well. So what was the bonus, or what outcomes from being 10 months in a hospital environment? Was it worth advocating, and even on smaller matters, just speaking for a person so vulnerable? And I must say that as pushing Christy out in the wheelchair on that last day and heading out to the exit, there was like this mini guard of honour to say goodbye to Christy. The manager was there. A social worker had sent her comments, wished us all the very best. There were several people there. One RN had come from another section of the hospital, given me this beautiful big hug and said, "You're a great mum, but I really want to say something just here." She was the great nurse, because she had taken on board the comments made over time and the retraining in certain areas. She'd really committed to this. Her attitude had changed toward Christy, the way she presented herself, whether it be lowering of the voice, not rushing things. She just implemented it so beautifully that I feel she was the hero to me on that day. And advocacy really does have an impact. It really does work. Our NDIS plan manager was able to get Christy into her own unit. So this is a different setting now for advocating. And Christy was living 24/7 care, living within the community with her beautiful assistance dog, here, Neffy, in training, along with her rescue cat, Maverick. And I found it quite interesting that we needed to work through this ownership of space. it was like there needed to be a shifting of attitude between the service provider, this is their space, to actually respecting this is Christy's home. And management and staff, for instance, would refer to Christy's home as, or the dwelling as, the house. And over time, I never used that phrase. And over time, it was like water just dripping on a stone. It made that path that the term Christie's stayed in reference to her house. Why is that important? Because decisions were being made that affected Christy without any family input. And I'll give you an example of that. That's hence the picture of the dog. One of these decisions involved Neffy, and Neffy had helped Christy immensely through this hospitalisation. She was helping Christy transition into her new home in the community. I get a phone call one day from the manager. The staff meeting went really well. They'd collectively decided that Neffy was no longer suitable there, because what had happened, Neffy was getting a little bit edgy because she wasn't exercised enough. And I live 2.5 hours round trip away. So the staff and manager had collectively decided Neffy needed to be rehomed. One staff had said, yes, I'll take the dog. So they were really happy with their decision. I absolutely sobbed after that phone call, because Neffy meant everything to Christy and myself. Excuse me, I'm just getting another slide. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So after...
Julie, I just have to ask, it's Julie, the other Julie, did you get Neffy back?
Oh, we got to get to the end of the story.
I beg your pardon, sorry.
No, I'm teasing. So I shouldn't tease, should I? After previously having Christy in hospital for almost a year, I felt so vulnerable. I felt I actually had to comply fully with the service provider in this matter of Neffy the dog, because my goal was to just keep Christy out of this hospital environment. Like, here we are in community care. I needed her to stay here. And I did feel taken advantage of. It's like that advocacy cape was in the wash that day because I was not wearing it. But thankfully, the NDIS service provider or coordinator, he always just helped me keep this balance. And this is why this slide. Now I was able to bear that responsibility to advocate, to believe in a fair outcome, and hope for a solution with Neffy that would work. So the outcome, 18 months on, is Neffy has been rehomed, but with a neighbour who Neffy adores. And it was wonderful because Neffy was next door. And last week, Christy herself, and I gave Christy this information very, very slowly. And Christy herself said last week, I'm so happy for Neffy, Mum, that she's with Debbie, the neighbour. And so I feel with advocating, that gave Christy a measure of control over the loss of her dog. She's fully accepted it, and we know how difficult change can be for a person with Huntington's. Christy's completely accepted that change. So she is in beautiful care with her service providers, and her support workers are absolutely amazing. And this is 2.5 years into the journey. So yeah, I'm just thinking of Huntington's families here too. We are under stress, our loved one is under stress, and it does take strength to advocate, to trust that you have that right to calmly provide information that's going to give your loved one quality care. to speak up on their behalf. Lovely examples of this are with allied health. For instance, when we've had a change of speech pathologist a couple of times just through their circumstance. And so I like to get on the phone and just introduce ourselves, the situation with Christy OCD, her fatigue levels, because some people have never met a person with Huntington's disease before. And then so when they physically come to the home, I might just step out the front door and again explain the intricacies of Huntington's disease. One beautiful speech he said, as soon as I started to explain and advocate for Christy, the awareness of what to look out for, she said, just what can I do? So beautiful, so respectful. And the relationship, and this is where it does pay off, the relationship that Christy has with her speech pathologist is beautiful. I don't need to be there. Christy often likes me to be there for things. I don't need to be there. It's just beautiful. The contrast here is another allied health professional Christy would say to me in advance, whenever there was an appointment coming up, will you be there, Mum? She just needed that security blanket. So this allied health person over a period of time got a bit frustrated. I go to other people with dementia. I go there on my own. So look, I relented on one occasion because I thought, I think anyway, just as a family member, sometimes you're not quite sure which decisions to make and how to go about things. So I thought, okay, you're in the area. She went. Christy has a really, and I'm sure this isn't uncommon, OCD issues, very, very, very difficult to manage there, and anxiety, a lot of anxiety around it. The allied health person came in, it was in clear wrapping, carrying a toilet seat. The beautiful support worker on that day said, I don't think that's a good idea. Didn't listen, allied health person, straight into the living area where Christy was. She's not ever used that toilet seat raiser at all. She was so distressed from that situation, she vomited later that night. It was everywhere. And when I mentioned this to the lady later, now she fully understands the complex issues of OCD, whatever is going on for a person with Huntington's disease. She very humbly apologised and realised that as a family member, we do know how to advocate for our person. So as family members, we do need to trust in our awareness of the person we care for, continue to calmly advocate, because that's going to be our strength for them as well. I love this picture. One of the support workers took it. So advocacy has many rewards, and it does bring better care for our person. And my daughter really does appreciate that. The GP, who cares for Christy, she says always book a double appointment. And she doesn't, we have it in such a way that Christy remains in the car with a carer close by, and everybody needs a Dr. Kelly. She's just incredible. So hadn't met anyone with Huntington's disease prior, always books a double appointment. Yeah, and she accepts the fact that Christy stays in the car. I get to discuss things. Christy's okay with that. There's no busy waiting room. And so she'll just come out to the car and speak with Christy just to see how she's going, to touch base. So yeah, look, one instance where the GP has really helped was recently paving the way for a specialist visit. This was going to be an intrusive type visit. She wrote a beautiful cover letter. Yeah, and so there was no intrusive examination. That we actually had Christy there present on the day. We didn't think she would be. But the letter that GP wrote really paved the way. And that's such a useful thing for families too.
About 5 minutes, Julie, if that's
okay. Just about to round off, actually. Thank you. So this is the last slide. Love never fails. All of us in the Huntington's community, we, that's just the job we need to do. Just continue to advocate for quality care for our loved one. It really does make a difference. And I'll just exit the screen. I don't know how to, sorry, to be presented bigger or whatever, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We really do appreciate the opportunity to speak on Christy's behalf.
Thank you so much. If you could hit stop screen share, I think, Julie. Thank you. This is a clap. If Lenny and Rob could appear to clap. Seriously, I'd like on behalf of everybody to thank you warmly for that very thoughtful and practical and actually very profound encounter with the power of advocacy. And I say that as the daughter of my mother for many years, who had not just aging, but mental health issues as a younger woman. You touched me very, very deeply. And I particularly was pleased by your emphasis on calmness, because I was ready to leap down the screen on the dog matter. And I'm very, very pleased the dog managed to come beside. So thank you, Julian. We'll welcome you back for the panel. And welcome to everybody. Some people have joined us at this Huntington's Australian National Conference 2021 during the presentation. So welcome to you. We have one more speaker in a moment from the Netherlands, and then we'll get our panel together and we'll respond to any questions or comments. I'll just draw attention before I introduce our final speaker. We've had people were thinking about, what do we want, was the call that our first speaker, Lewis Kaplan, put out in terms of getting better results for people living with Huntington's and their family, and seeking us to reflect on this question of what we want and then how we might advocate for it. And Gail from Townsville in Queensland says her son lives in Western Central Queensland, a small town. He has an NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme plan, but services in the rural area are nearly nil. And it's so frustrating for him and myself, who is seeking to support him. Support workers are not educated at all about Huntington's disease, and it must be very difficult for them as well. Again, showing that great graciousness that Julie shows in terms of empathy and understanding for carers and professionals as well. Joe has said, it seems that Julie's daughter's experience in hospital is about basic human dignity and respect for all patients. I read them out partly to encourage those of you watching right now to add your thoughts or comments in the Q&A or the chat, which is now enabled for you, but also because there will be people viewing this later who won't have access to seeing these comments.